Hey folks, this is another article I believe it's worth reading and sharing. I'm Vernon Neal Reed with AI Infrastructure Media. The article is Microsoft Quantifies Environmental Impacts of Data Center Cooling from Cradle to Grave, and this is in their new Nature study. This is by Catherine Bolgar. So let's get into it. Let's read. Microsoft researchers have published a paper in Nature that quantifies for the first time how much energy and water are consumed and greenhouse gas emissions are produced by 4 data center cooling techniques across the entire lifespan of the data centers. This so-called life cycle assessment evaluates more than just which resources are consumed during data center operations. It also digs into what was required to produce all the virtual machines, chips, servers, cooling, and other support equipment, such as extracting raw materials, manufacturing components, transportation, and different points in the process, and even eventual disposal. That's the type of data that researchers say can help companies design data centers to use less carbon, energy, and water. A lot of people do life cycle assessments after the fact to understand a data center's environmental impact after it's built, said Hussam Alisa, Director of Systems Technology and Cloud Operations and Innovation at Microsoft and leader of the Life Cycle Assessment Study. When we're trying to make future design decisions, we typically look at total cost of ownership, performance, sustainability, and other factors. We're advocating in this paper for the use of life cycle assessment tools to guide engineering decisions early on, and also sharing the tool with the industry to make adoption easier. Microsoft plans to use the findings from life cycle assessments that accounts for data centers' carbon, water, and energy impacts to inform new data center designs and cloud operations, and to help meet its broader sustainability goals. For instance, the study found that switching from air cooling to cold plates that cool data center chips more directly, a newer technology that Microsoft is deploying in its data centers, could reduce greenhouse gas emissions and energy demand by roughly 15% and water consumption by 30 to 50% across the data center's entire lifespan. This is not just water used for cooling, but also in power generation and manufacturing of components. Pretty good. This level of detail is rare and hard to uncover. In fact, it took the team more than 2 years to complete the analysis. That's why Microsoft is also making the methodology available to others in the industry through an open research repository. The researchers also presented preliminary results at the Open Compute Project Global Summit, where the industry shares hardware designs and best practices to support growing demand for compute infrastructure. The work builds on Microsoft's continued efforts to construct unified life cycle assessment methods and tools for cloud providers. The paper is the first to detail how to construct a life cycle assessment for cooling in cloud operations, taking into account software, chips, servers, buildings, and the energy grid. It also introduces a new approach to help others build apples to apples comparisons of environmental burdens. Through the open research repository, anyone in the industry will be able to plug in their own data and scenarios to conduct a life cycle assessment of their own operations. Our intention is not to say that is the right technology. They all could be. There are different circumstances that make use a technology, Alisa says. What we're trying to do here is to tell the industry, here's how you build an end-to-end life cycle assessment that takes cooling into account. And here's a tool for you that you can customize to your specific needs and then make a decision. The published Nature study covers cooling chips for general compute, or CPUs, not the specialized chips designed to handle AI workloads. The team is working on a follow-up to examine lifecycle impacts of AI chips and expects to see similar improvements with advanced cooling methods. Of course, data center operations depend on external factors such as local energy grids. The Nature paper also quantified how much energy, water, and greenhouse gas emissions could be saved by switching from a typical energy grid to 100% renewable sources of energy, finding that greenhouse gas emissions should be reduced by 85 to 90% regardless of what cooling technologies were used. Microsoft is aiming to replace its energy load with 100% renewable energy. Big goal there. In locations where fully renewable energy isn't available through the local grid, it purchases a comparable amount of renewable energy available elsewhere. Wonder how it does that. 4 types of cooling technology. For the study, the team spent more than 2 years studying 4 cooling technologies: air cooling, cold plates, one-phase immersion, and two-phase immersion for servers. Air cooling has been a standard approach for cooling data centers, but the industry has more recently been exploring cooling technologies that rely on liquids, which can dissipate heat much more directly and efficiently than air. Cold plates are a type of direct-to-chip cooling because a coolant is pumped in a loop to a flat container that sits right on top of the chips in a server rack. One-phase immersion involves operating servers in a tank that has cooling fluid pushed through in a circuit. In two-phase immersion, server racks are in a tank filled with a different fluid that boils at low temperatures, with the vapor rising to condense, thus cooling and return to the tank. The study found that cold plates and the 2 immersion cooling technologies reduce greenhouse gas emissions 15 to 21% over the entire life cycles, energy demand 15 to 20%, and water consumption 31 to 52% in data centers compared with air cooling. The team expected the 3 liquid methods to outperform air cooling on carbon emissions and water and energy consumption, but those benefits hadn't been quantified across the entire life cycle of those technologies. Two-phase immersion has potential for reduction in all areas, but it currently uses liquid polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, which are under regulatory scrutiny in the European Union and the US, putting them at odds with pollution reduction goals and possibly making them unavailable in the future. Microsoft has investigated but is not currently using immersion cooling technologies in data center operations. This is the same quote from before. What we're trying to do here is to tell the industry, here's how you build an end-to-end life cycle assessment that takes cooling into account. And here's a tool for you that you can customize to your specific needs and then make a decision. Going on, Microsoft is already installing cold plates in its data centers while also exploring other next-generation cooling techniques. For instance, Microsoft has begun deploying rack-scale cold plate cooling technology using heat exchanger units, or sidekicks, alongside AI infrastructure servers powered by the latest GPUs. It was interesting to see that cold plates could be as good as the 2 immersion cooling methods, said Teresa Nick, Director, National Systems and Sustainability for Cloud Operations and Innovation at Microsoft, and co-author of the paper in Nature. Choosing the right method is complicated. The calculation of design factors such as total cost of ownership, availability, time to market, and even reliability is mostly straightforward to quantify and compare. That isn't the case with sustainability impacts, which can be hard to define and calculate across an entire supply chain and data center ecosystem. Getting information about how raw materials were obtained, as well as the carbon, water, and energy involved in manufacturing, can be difficult. The Microsoft authors pressed suppliers to divulge such data though not all of them participated, then produced formulas so they and others could estimate the figures in the future. Having the embodied emissions known, public, and shared in databases could help accelerate lifecycle assessment efforts. Lifecycle assessments can also be used to inform all aspects of data center structure and functions, including how to optimize and run a data center most efficiently. One technology might do better on one measure, another on a different one, with none of them outperforming in every area. In a nutshell, we're trying to understand the trade-offs, Nick said. You're trying to understand the context of what you're doing and what the impacts are. For more information, including more detail on the data center, on the data and methodology, review the Nature paper. All right. So that was it. That sounds very interesting and actually pretty good to me, especially the fact that they're taking this information and basically making it public and providing something that you can really have apples to apples comparison. And so, because that's usually a very difficult thing to do, and there's always context in when people put out do research and the findings, etc. This one sounds to me that their idea is to have kind of a level playing field, have standards around how they make the assessments, and the good thing is so that would also influence future build outs of data center, instead of kind of building data center and then kind of looking back. So anyway, good read. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, this paper I'll give you, the name is Microsoft Quantifies Environmental Impacts of Data Center Cooling from Cradle to Grave in New Nature Study, and it's by Catherine Bolgar. I will put the link, as always, in this post. And what I will also do, I will get the link to the Nature paper, and I'll put that also in the post. Hope you guys are doing well. Have a great day. I'm Vernon Neal Reed, and this is AI Infrastructure Media.